Book 9, Chapter 4 of the Adventures of Gil Blas of Santillane by Alain René Lesage, translated by Tobias Smollett. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Book 9, Chapter 4, The Treatment of Gil Blas in the Tower of Segovia, the cause of his imprisonment. Their first favour was to clap me up in a cell, where they left me on the straw like a criminal, whose only earthly portion was to con over his dying speech in solitude. I passed the night, not in bewailing my fate, for it had not yet presented itself in all its aggravation, but in endeavouring to divine its cause. Doubtless it must have been Calderona's handiwork, and yet, though his branching honours might have pressed thick upon his senses, I could not conceive how the Duke of Lerma could have been induced to treat me so inhumanly. Sometimes I apprehended my arrest to have been without his excellency's knowledge. At other times I thought him the contriver of it, for some political reasons, such as weigh with ministers when they sacrifice their accomplices at the shrine of state policy. My mind was vibrating to and fro with these various conjectures, when the dawn, peeping in at my little grated window, presented to my sight all the horror of the place where I was confined. Then did I vent my sorrows without ceasing, and my eyes became two springs of tears, flowing inexhaustibly at the remembrance of my prosperous state. Pending this paroxysm of grief, a turnkey brought me my day's allowance of bread and water. He looked at me, and on the contemplation of my tear-besprinkled visage, jailer as he was, there came over him a sentiment of pity. "Do not despair," said he, "this life is full of crosses, but mind them not. You are young. After these days you will live to see better. In the meantime, eat at the king's mess with what appetite you may." My comforter withdrew with this quaint invitation, answered by my groans and tears. The rest of the day was spent in cursing my wayward destiny, without thinking of my empty stomach. As for the royal morsel, it seemed more like the message of wrath than the boon of benevolence, the tantalizing protraction of pain rather than the solace of affliction. Night came, and with it the rattle of a key in my keyhole. My dungeon door opened, and in came a man with a wax light in his hand. He advanced towards me, saying, "Signor Gil Blas, behold in me one of your old friends. I am Don Andrew de Tordesillas, in the Archbishop of Grenada's service, while you enjoyed that prelate's favour. You may recollect engaging his interest in my behalf, and thereby procuring me a post in Mexico. But instead of embarking for the Indies, I stopped in the town of Alicant. There I married the governor's daughter, and by a series of adventures, of which you shall hereafter have the particulars, I am now warden of this tower. It is expressly forbidden me to let you speak to any living soul, to give you any better bed than straw, or any other sustenance than bread and water. But besides that, your misfortunes interest my humanity. You have done me service, and gratitude countervails the harshness of my orders. They think to make me the instrument of their cruelty, but it is my better purpose to soften the rigour of your captivity. Get up and follow me." Though my humane keeper was entitled to some acknowledgment, my spirits were so affected as to interdict my speech. All I could do was to attend him. We crossed a court, and mounted a narrow staircase to a little room at the top of the tower. It was no small surprise, on entering, to find a table with lights on it, neatly set out with covers for two. "They will serve up immediately," said Tordesillas. "We are going to sup together. This snug retreat is appointed for your lodging. It will agree better with you than your cell. From your window you will look down on the flowery banks of the Arima, and the delicious vale of Coca, bounded by the mountains which divide the two Castiles. At first you will care little for prospects, but when time shall have softened your keener sensations into a composed melancholy, it will be a pleasure to feast your eyes on such engaging scenes. Then, as for linen and other necessaries befitting a man accustomed to the comforts of life, they shall be always at your service. Your bed and board shall be such as you could wish, with a plentiful supply of books. In a word, you shall have everything but your liberty. My spirits were a little tranquillized by these obliging offers. I took courage and returned my best thanks, assuring him that his generous conduct restored me to life, and that I hoped at some time or other to find an opportunity of testifying my gratitude. To be sure, and why should you not? Answered he. Did you fancy yourself a prisoner for life? Nothing less likely, and I would lay a wager that you will be released in a very few months. What say you, Signor Don Andrew? Exclaimed I. Then surely you are acquainted with the occasion of my misfortune. You guess right, replied he. The alguazil who brought you hither told me the whole story in confidence. The king, hearing that the Count de Lemos and you were in the habit of escorting the Prince of Spain by night to a house of suspicious character, as a punishment for your loose morals, has banished the count and sent you hither to be treated in the style of which you have had a specimen. And how, said I, did that circumstance come to the king's knowledge? That is what I am most curious to ascertain. And that, answered he, is precisely what the alguazil did not tell, apparently because he did not know. At this epoch of our conversation the servants brought in supper. When everything was set in order, Tordesillas sent away the attendants, not wishing our conversation to be overheard. He shut the door, and we took our seats opposite to each other. Let us say grace and fall to, said he. Your appetite ought to be good after 2 days of fasting. Under this impression he loaded my plate as if he had been cramming the craw of a starveling. In fact, nothing was more likely than that I should play the devil among the ragouts. But what is likely does not always happen. Though my intestines were yearning for support, their staple stuck in my throat, for my heart loathed all pleasurable indulgence in the present state of my affairs. In vain did my warden, to drive away the blue devils, pledge me continually and expatiate on the excellence of his wine. Imperishable nectar would have been pricked according to the fastidious report of my palate. This being the case, he went another way to work, and told me the story of his marriage, with as much humour as such a subject would admit. Here he was still less successful. So wandering was my attention, that before the end I had forgotten the beginning and the middle. At length he was convinced that there was no diverting my gloomy thoughts for that evening. After finishing his solitary supper, he rose from table, saying, Signor de Santillane, I shall leave you to your repose, or rather to the free indulgence of your own reveries. But take my word for it, your misfortune will not be of long continuance. The king is naturally good. When his anger shall have passed away, and your deplorable estate shall occur to his milder thoughts, your punishment will appear sufficient in his eyes. With these words, my kind-hearted gaoler went downstairs and sent the servants to take away. Not even the brass candlesticks were left behind, and I went to bed by the palpable darkness of a glimmering lamp suspended against the wall. End of Book 9, Chapter 4.